Good morning, everyone. Welcome. This is Angela Coulter, your Consciousness Transformation Ascension Guide, originator of Trinity Energy Progression, bringing you this week's Living the Shift. I just came back from a long weekend with some very close soul tribe, doing what we call a deep dive retreat weekend, which I've talked about here and on my Monday podcast with Sarah C. Gavignoni, Ascended World. But we do them once a quarter. We're going to start doing them with small, intimate groups to do this with others as well very shortly. But one of the things that came up in the very beginning of the weekend it became a hot topic, and it was actually very cathartic to look at it, to focus on shifting it. And good morning, Yasmin. And so I wanted to cover, I felt like it was important to cover this because, I've talked about gender inequalities, but probably, excuse me, not from this perspective or not from this shifting viewpoint. But what happened was in the conversation, what came up was the topic of Lilith. And Lilith, many do not know, there are multiple mythologies that talk about Lilith as being the first woman in the Garden of Eden, or whatever, if you want to talk about biblical. I believe that Lilith still exists in the Kabbalah or the Torah, one of the Hebrew Old Testaments or whatever. But anyway, Sumerian mythology. There's we have so many different mythologies, but a lot of people come back to the Garden of Eden, right? So Lilith was supposedly actually the first woman, where the original statement in, I think it's the first chapter of Genesis, talks about how men and women were created simultaneously. And then in the second chapter, it talks about how Adam was created first and then woman. So then there's this other whole story about Lilith actually being the first woman who was created at the same time as Adam. And so it was this whole and the reason being, she got cast out of the Garden of Eden because she refused to be subordinate to Adam. And then there's this whole mythology that goes off that she then, left the Garden of Eden. And actually, it's funny, not cast out. Actually, I believe the story is that she actually left. And many claim her to be like the mother of all, she became the mother of all demons and all that kind of stuff. So, and then, then Eve was created after that. So it was interesting that we were having this conversation in our retreat weekend, and this whole story came up, and it caused a lot of contention. Like, well, what did Lilith do? What did she do that would cause her to, cause that to all happen? And so, when you look at the story more closely, where it's listed or written or whatever, it's that she wouldn't lie underneath him for intercourse, like that she wouldn't be in missionary and let him have power over her, kind of thing. So it's interesting that this there's this age old battle, right? And it's this continuous argument and debate about who is more powerful. There's many religions. They have, and we've had many matriarchal religions too, but of the last several thousand years, it's mostly been patriarchal dominant. But there are some that are pretty equal. In the Hindu religion, there's many deities that have both aspects of the male female inside, and so there's all of this. Anyway, the key being that from very early ages, and we've created mythologies to influence the behavior of others, we have decided to create the perception that the male and female genders are unequal. And so the understanding is really that it happened so that we could create a certain set of dualities, like externalizing energies that we have within us, part of the process of becoming more dense and separate so that we could have these experiences in inequality And so if we actually just created them separate and equal, then we wouldn't have had so much fun with inequalities. So it sounds sort of weird to say that, but it's funny. It's like, okay, well, maybe, like first time around it was equal. It's like, oh, well, that's not fun enough because it's just too non-dramatic. So we have to create more drama and separation and and inequalities. Well, then there's other, mythologies, and there's other things. There's so many more where, excuse me. And if you look at it, a lot of it has had to do with this internal battle. Good morning, Gloria. There has been this internal battle of the masculine and feminine, right? And if you look at it from a much, much more expanded perception than how we embody in gender here, it's because here's the thing. When we are out of the body, our souls have no gender. My understanding and my remembrance is we've all been men and women, both. We've all been both. Nobody's been just women and nobody's been just men, because why would we want to do that? We would want to, like try to, okay, like in separation, I'm going to fully embody this one energy and deny myself the other energy and see what that's like. And then I'm going to switch. I'm going to go to the other extreme and I'm going to embody this full energy and I'm going to deny that energy. What we're coming to now is this resolution of the wholeness that exists inside of us. And as we go along, it's time for us to come to resolution, come to gratitude, right? To know that, like you can argue it until the cows come home about, who's greater. Women can give birth, men can't. Men want to be all, like the male cultural thing is all being all masculine, and masculine is equal to, you know, um, tough and tough and non emotional and strong and all that kind of stuff. And so but the point of me bringing all this up is that as we looked at this last weekend, we were looking at how we have so much embedded in our experience of separation and inequality in specifically the beliefs of gender inequalities and gender separation. So, we go, oh, well, I'm all female. Look at the way we still culturally bring up boys and girls generally. I tell my kids, I have two girls and who are adults now, and I told them, they were like petri dishes for us because test subjects for us, because we were like, okay, well, we don't believe that we need to bring our kids up that way. We want them to be equal and balanced in their energies. And we didn't bring them up, being like saying, oh, you have to play with dolls, or you have to dress in a dress, or you have to dress in pink or pastels and all that kind of stuff. And we gave them, trucks and building toys and all kinds of stuff, and they really grew up without a preference for either. Like they liked all different kinds of stuff because that's what they grew up with, which shows you a lot about what we teach people. And then we perpetuate this idea of, oh, women have to be, like if you listen to people with different gender children, right? And it's like, oh, well, boys will be boys, which then sort of victimizes boys to their own gender, And I'm not doing this with any judgment. This is just observation. But when we start looking at all that stuff and saying, oh, well, this is a boy, he's supposed to act this way, right? And he's supposed to be wild and untamable, and that's okay. And I don't have to discipline that because that's, boys will be boys. But, if a girl acts that way, it's like, oh, well, she's got to be disciplined and taught to behave better and be more well behaved. And I've always loved I always loved the T-shirt or whatever that says, well behaved women never make history. But the whole thing is, we have so many things built into our practices and cultures, and the way we act out certain lessons based on our deep-seated beliefs and practices here in the 3D of gender inequalities. So that is a big thing for us to resolve. It's one of the things that we are pretending isn't there, but it is. as we still perpetuate the idea that women are supposed to be mothers, and if they have kids, they're supposed to be the ones that are the predominant caretakers. I mean, that's not as prevalent today as it was, 20 years ago, but it's still very prevalent. That a woman feels like she's failed if she hasn't had kids, or if she's not the one who's been the predominant caretaker of their kids and stuff like that. And likewise, men are still like thinking they need to be providers and they need to be the stronghold and the foundation of their families. I mean, and I'm saying this because of I've seen thousands of people over the last 10 years, and I will tell you that this is a trend of it's still a foundation of belief for so many. So the thing is to look within, and one of the biggest realizations in consciousness as we expand our consciousness and come into this place of much higher levels of, much more expanded levels of remembrance, is that we have all of those energies inside. And what we have chosen to embody was what we chose to embody for certain sets of lessons. So it doesn't matter about being female or male, or redheaded or blonde, or green-eyed or blue-eyed or brown-eyed, or whatever. It doesn't matter. Big, tall, short, big or small. It's handicapped. All of these things are things that we have chosen to create in the embodiment that we've created as we come here, so that we can have a set of lessons that are reflected based on those representations. Like, I was trying to find a neutral word. Those representations. So you don't want to consider them a handicap. You don't want to consider them a strength. It is a matter of how did I embody, why did I embody this, so that I can have, for a set of lessons from them, right? Or achieve something through that propulsion based on whatever that is. What I find fascinating, and I did speak about this last week. God, last week seems like it was a month ago because I had this retreat in between. But I did start talking about, gender neutrality, how we have like a lot of those coming in who are starting to identify as non-binary, which is, as I've said so many times, such an indication of our remembrance coming in, of the fact that the gender thing is really a non-issue. It's just part of the illusion, and we choose to embody our gender in a way that we allow culture to teach us. We have built in from other lifetimes and all that kind of stuff. But I find it really interesting that right now there's so much more gender, like those coming in saying they're non-binary, and I would not be surprised in the least if bodies start changing to be more non-gender specific. And I can't even tell you what that would look like, except that's come to me in meditation not too long ago. But think about that. And don't tell me that's not possible. That happens in nature all the time. We have animals that change their gender if there's not enough of the other gender around, so that they can actually have their children, right? That's already happening. It's that we have held so tightly onto these separations based on gender that we still maintain the same thing, and it's funny because you have the strengths on both sides. Women say, oh, well, you don't know what it feels like to have a child. Men are like, oh, well, yeah, but I could hold a mountain on my back or whatever. And there's this fight, this battling for who's stronger, and I've always said, like the way our physiology is, we just have different strengths. We have different strengths. And I look at it as completely equal. And in duality, they're sort of opposite. Not really opposite, but they're complementary. Let's say complementary. That's a much more holistic way of saying it. They're complementary to each other. And so, like I think, I can't remember which mythology it is. Oh, I think it was the Greek mythology. In Greek mythology, I believe, there was like originally the male female was one god, one entity that was split apart and then like banished to the opposite ends of whatever, whatever the universe, and then forever like looking to find each other, and come together again. I think that was like the original perception of like soulmates and stuff like that. But anyway, it's a split. And, we talk about twin flames, we talk about all kinds of things in that kind of context that, there's a split with this desire to, like feel like we have a hole and something missing and that we have to gain it back to be whole. But then what we're really remembering is, oh, well, nothing can ever split from us because it's always an illusion anyway. It's only a matter of reclaiming it within ourselves. And so that's the biggest shift that's so important right now is, men embracing their feminine side and women embracing their masculine side. Because as we come more into a place of remembrance, we become less separate in density, and we realize there's no need for that lesson anymore. We don't need that set of lessons anymore. So when we stop and when we clear that out, when we shift that, then it clears out a whole bunch of like contention, a whole bunch of competition, proving who's the stronger sex, proving who's the wiser, who, like there's so many. Think about all the comments, right? Think about all the comments in our culture and around the world about like, oh, that's just men. Oh, that's just women. Oh, well, you know how women are. Oh, well, you know how men are. I hear it all the time. Talking about, oh, well, he's just a man. He doesn't, blah, blah, blah. Well, and the thing is, the more we say that, the more we create it, right? When we realize and start living the fact that we create our realities with our words and our intentions and our energy, as the infinite divine creators we perpetuate that to say, oh, well, he's just a man and a man can't help it but be this way. Well, then we just continue to create that in our realities. And the same thing with women, like the jokes about women not being able to draw, like things like that. And when you really think about it, it's sort of ridiculous. It's sort of like, how can somebody's gender have anything to do with how they do something, right? It's just as ridiculous as saying, how can somebody's hair color have anything to do with how they act and how smart they are? When we have the whole movement of, the blonde thing and how like, blondes have more fun, but then they're dumb blondes, right? And I can't tell you how many times over the years I hear people saying, "Oh, I'm having a blonde moment," and it's like, what do you mean by that? What do you mean? There is no correlation between the color of your hair and your intelligence. There is no correlation between your gender and your strength or your knowledge and understanding. It is what you have been told and what we continue to teach ourselves and create ourselves by saying things like that and by expecting things like that. Because when we do that, we create the space for our creation and then it just perpetuates. So that's something that's so important for us to become really, really cognizant of. It's interesting to see that it's been such an important session. It's been such an important lesson for us. It's been a very important lesson and we decided to do it this way in separation, to create those inequalities based in gender. And now it's time for us to remember that it is simply an illusion and part of, because the more we come to resolution and stop judging the other genders or different, yeah, Gloria says keep perpetuating behaviors and beliefs, exactly. But the more we continue to judge and keep different genders unequal, the more we prevent ourselves from balancing and completing those energies within ourselves. And that really prevents us from coming into that remembrance. It prevents us from coming into that strength of wholeness that we forget and have forgotten due to these embodiments. So, and that's really important. And think about that, because as long as we deny it of ourselves, as long as we judge, say, okay, well, I think men are just losers because blah, 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 or women are just weak because of blah, 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 well, then I'm going to deny those energies within myself if I judge them because I don't want to exhibit them, or I'll embrace it and then not aspire to get to be any more of myself. Then what that limited, oh, I don't know why I'm yawning so much. It must be a big topic. because I'm really not tired. But that's the whole idea of, the more we judge other gender things or whatever, the more we deny it within ourselves. The more we continue to deny it within ourselves, or that we victimize ourselves to it to say, "Oh, I'm just a woman. I'm just a man. I'm just a man. I can't help it." I've heard that, right? Listen to what mothers and fathers say. "Oh, he's just a boy. Just being boy. Boys just being boys." I hear that all the time. When my kids were growing up, it used to trigger me because I'm like, yeah, kids being kids. That's something maybe you want to say. But boys just being boys, people would say, "Oh, well, you don't know what it's like to have boys." I know what it's like to have kids. And, I didn't bring my kids up to be unequal. I brought them up to be fully embracing both sides of the table so that they can be who they choose to be versus what they're taught to be or told to be. That's where I think a lot of our internal conflict comes up. And, saying things like, "Oh, if you're a woman, it's bad to exhibit masculine traits. And if you're a man, it's bad to exhibit feminine qualities." But the thing is, the reality is we have both of them inside of us. So that's our resolution. That's the importance for us to come to resolution within ourselves is, first of all, to recognize mythologies are mythologies, and we've created them to perpetuate those separations. We have created them to have the experience of the inequalities and really embrace that experience, right? Victimhood and lack and subordination and power, right? And abuse, all of that is one of the core things that have come through that gender separation. It still goes on today, not as badly in as in many other ages, but it is still going on today. It's still prevalent depending on the society you're in. So, and it's only like people are treated unequal simply because of the gender they were born into. There are still like places, and I won't even name the countries, but there are still places that, more babies, girl babies, are put up for adoption because they're only allowed like one child. And they don't want that to be a girl. They want it to be a boy because there's still that whole like, lineage and that's stronger. And see, like, think about all those things. Those are all gender-based inequalities that we've created that don't even exist, that aren't even real. So yeah, think about how much we have culturally that talk about that. "Oh, well, yeah, I want to have my boy, you know, so that I can pass on the name," which is not even a case in many cases anymore because people are getting married and not changing their names. Or people are just, or they're going with the female's name, or they're going hyphenated so that it's equal. So it doesn't even matter. It doesn't even matter. These things are becoming less and less important. It used to be this perpetuation of the species, and in all reality, like, we have so many, we can really slow that down quite tremendously, and still have plenty, plenty here on the planet. But that's all part of the separation thing. It's all part of what we again have wanted to create for ourselves. So it's for us to come to a place of, I'm going to go back to the 28 days of forgiveness that Sarah and I did through Ascended World, that started in February, but y'all can still do it, still up there. And we're actually coming out with a much more robust, like a much bigger program too, that has that as part of it. But you can still go back and do that. And the forgiveness thing is so important because it's not just forgiveness, it's apology, forgiveness, acceptance, embracing the whole experience, loving it, having gratitude for it so that it can all be in this cycle, this circle of completion. So we get to this place of saying, "I see what it did for us. I see the expressions, and I see how it has really embedded our psyche and our sets of lessons. And so I'm thankful for that. Thankful that's what we wanted to create. So we did. I'm thankful to have had both sides of the fence, right? I've been the abuser, the abused, the victim, and the perpetrator, and everything in between. All of us have. And to say, okay, well, that was what I wanted to do. I wanted to play all the parts on the stage. Like, I didn't want to just be the writer and producer. I wanted to be all the actors that play the parts. And I got to do all of them, and great. That's been so, saturating and full as what we wanted to do in separation, and denial and exclusion and the rainbow that creates the rainbow of colors. And now it's to let it all come back together to say, well, look at how colorful in this wholeness. Look at how beautiful in those completed experiences that I recognize I am within myself, that it's all here. It's all inside. And so when we come to that, then we come to such peace within ourselves. And then we stop perpetuating these things, these illusions in this reality that are so based on something as menial as or trivial. That's the word. Something as trivial as gender separation. And that's why I believe, again, that's why I believe there are so many who are coming in and choosing to be non-binary, choosing to be like non-committed to one or the other, one gender or the other, and to allow them to be sort of whole within themselves, which I actually believe is more complete in remembrance. And they might feel really uncomfortable with that. It might be a really uncomfortable thing in our culture. We don't even have words for that. You know, it's funny because I know a number of people, my kids as young adults, they have a number of friends who are going on as non-binary. And the biggest challenge is coming up with a pronoun, because in our culture here, we have none. There are some cultures that actually have pronouns specific to those who are non-gender specific. We don't yet. And it's time for us to do that, you know, because they just, it doesn't fit with the other stuff they have. They deserve to have their own pronoun. That's my vote anyway. So think about that and look at within your life, look at all of the energies that you commit to following roles that are gender based, expectations. You know, being a mother, being a father, right? Being a sister, being a girl or a woman in society, or a man in society, and those things that drive you to live up to that, right? Oh, I have to be this. Okay, how about the women? I have to be this weight. I have to look like this. I can't have gray hair. I have to not have wrinkles. Da 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 da. I have to be attractive to men to feel attractive. I have to do things to be considered attractive by the other sex. I have to, let's think of, there's so many. And then on the men's side, it's like, oh, I can't show my feelings. I have to be, you know, I have to be strong. And I have to, you know, have a certain demeanor, and I have to provide, and I have to have a strong foundation and to be worthy, right? That's what we believe. And that drives us, drives our entire lives. And now it's time to let those go, because that's when I work with clients, that's some of the most challenging things to help people let go of, are those things that they cling on to as part of their identity. And it's based on what they were taught that they had to be because of the gender that they were born into. So I'm telling you here, it's not true. It's all an illusion. It's all what we created. So we can change it. We can change it with it. But the first step is to change it within ourselves, and really to come to acceptance within that. Saying, I don't have to do anything for anybody else, because that goes back to self-nourishment. That goes back to being centered within the self versus, you know, basing your what you are based on what other people believe of you or think of you, or, oh, what are people going to think it if I walk out in public in my pajamas? Well, a lot of people are doing that now. I do it all the time. But I mean, people do that now more than ever because of the whole, you know, the whole COVID thing or whatever. It's given us an opportunity to sort of change all that. You know, like, what if, oh, how can you go out in public looking like that? Right? I've had people say things to me like, how could you, not how could you, not to me, like, just comments, but, oh, well, people get on, you know, these lives, and they just don't even care about what they look like. And I'm like, that's the point. That's the point, is to be comfortable with who you are, no matter when that is. And we still hide faces of ourselves from our world. And a lot of the times when we face things is because, you know, we hide faces of ourselves is because of gender expectations and roles. So, and they're so deeply embedded, right? I could talk about this for hours and still not touch on every aspect of where we have it embedded. You know, it's like, oh, well, I'm now going to be, you know, a meek old lady or something like that, or a meek old man. And I mean, that's an age thing, but then there's still gender things in there too, right? Or I'm gonna, I love when people say things like, well, do you still appreciate it when, a man holds a door for you? And I'm just like, well, of course, because I hold doors for men all the time. Like, it's a mutual respect thing. I don't, it's not like women have been brought up to be treated like, these delicate flowers that'll break or they're so fragile. And we're not. We're not. We have all those energies within us and we are all so strong. We are infinite. We're infinite creators and we have all these aspects within us that we're allowed to embody. So, like we like, oh, well, we'll talk about being equal. And then it's like, oh, ha, ha, ha. But, he doesn't do this for me or that, or he does this, or I appreciate when a man does this for me. And it's like, well, when do we start shifting? It's in time for us to start shifting to a place where it's a mutual respect, an equal partnership, right? To go back to, what I was talking about, the whole Lilith thing. It's like, what was wrong with the fact that we split gender and created it simultaneously? Because that would be equal and opposite in the yin yang, right? And I don't like saying equal and opposite. I like to say complementary to each other in the yin yang. And so, and that's what duality is. That's the yin yang. We created that. And so when we go back to that, we say, okay, well, we created these different embodiments. And now, though, in completion within ourselves, we don't have to have those separate embodiments anymore. We can start having them within ourselves. And so, like I said, many will say, well, we have to have babies. And it's like, well, look at how many people today are not what we consider heterosexual, right? Or cisgender or whatever. There's all this kind of stuff. And it's like, we will evolve. We can evolve. It's our choice to. And it's for us to let go of all of these roles, all of these, shifting, all of these expectations. When we let go of all of them, then we can evolve. We are free. We free up our energy to create differently. What does that look like? We probably don't have any context for that. But in nature, we have animals that change their gender because there's not enough of the other to create more of their animals and to perpetuate. What if we just started to create based on a thought? Oh, it's time for me to create another of me. And so it is. Because we are the creator. And think about, even when you go back, I know I never quote the Bible, but we just had a lot of discussion about this weekend. But think about that. It's like, and so it is. And it is good. And that's how we create. That is us. We are that infinite divine entity, no matter how you want to look at it, no matter how many faces you want to put to it, no matter what, it's interesting. I read something recently that said, it's funny that you have to choose which, like theosophy, you choose, yeah, or you have to choose a religion or you choose a mythology to follow. And I've never felt that way. I've always felt like there's truth in all of them, right? You just have to find them, or there's like reminders in all of them, and also limitations in all of them, right? But the person whose article I was reading said, isn't it sort of funny how blind we are to the fact that we feel like we have to choose one, because if they were actually true, then why would we have to choose? Because they all would be the same if they were the truth of the wholeness. And it's just a matter of how we perceive them, and then how we believe to exclude other things and all that kind of stuff. And as we come back into wholeness, it's to look at all of them and say, well, let's bring this all back together. Let's bring all of that back within myself. All of those faces, all of those facets, all of that gender, representation, all of those inequalities are illusion. And I have all of those facets in me. And that's where we take our power back. So take a look at that this week, and look under the rocks within you and around you to see like what's expected because of women or because of men or because of being a girl or a boy. The faster we shift that, the quicker we will evolve. I mean, look at just one generation. We are doing it. We're doing a job on that, because look at, I just see young adults and kids are so different today, which is fabulous in terms of that expansion. It's just a matter of it's time for the rest of us who have been here already and are in those habits to shift those, to allow that space and allow that for ourselves as well. So, on that, I'm going to let you go. Have a great week. Thanks for joining me. This is Angela Coulter signing off with this week's Living the Shift. Bye.